What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to take a little bit of a look at the top 10 cards from Untamed, though please do remember we are going Age of Ascension only. We've done a bunch of other houses, links to all of those are in the description, and I should give a huge shout out to the lovely folks over on the Facebook group who helped me out with my poll. I've made a few changes, as I tend to do, but especially up the higher end, you guys pretty much have it on, which makes me rather happy indeed. Couple quick honourable mentions before we go. Shard of Life, it's not the best shard, but you get to shuffle a card from your discard pile into your deck for each friendly shard. Obviously, like all the shards, if there's 3 shards, it's great. If there's 1, it's far less good. You're shuffling into your deck, so you got to wait to draw into it. It's not as good as some of the other shards, but it's still kind of cool. And Fang House. Now, Fang House should have been in the top 10 if I followed the poll perfectly, but I did not. 3 power creature with assault free and hazardous free. When you attack, you do 3 damage before the attack. When you are attacked, you do 3 damage before the attack. It's not going to do you wonders in terms of racing for Amber, but in terms of taking out weaker creatures without taking any damage itself, it ain't half bad, ladies and gentlemen. It ain't half bad. So starting off at number 10, they're everywhere. Gives you an Amber bonus, and you deal 2 damage to each enemy flank creature, and 1 damage to each enemy creature not on a flank. It just spreads a whole bunch of damage around, if I'm honest with you. It gives you the Amber bonus, and it damages every enemy creature. That alone, for me, makes it worthy of being on the list. It's not a great board-wiping card. It's not going to destroy everything. It's no Tendrils of Pain, for instance. But as a decent card, which is going to come along, get a bit of damage down while giving you an Amber bonus, yeah, it's pretty cool. In at number 9, Grovekeeper. Now, Untamed is one of the houses that changed the most when we came into Age of Ascension, and honestly, not always in a good way. Back in Call of the Archons, it was the ultimate Amber rushing house, and then when we ended up in Age of Ascension, we no longer had Dust Pixie, and although we had Full Moon, we no longer had Hunting Witch, and it's not the same house it used to be. But one of the things it does do really well in Age of Ascension is granting +1 power counters, which is exactly what Grovekeeper does. At the end of your turn, give each neighbouring creature a +1 power counter. Now, it's a 3 power creature and it doesn't have elusive. It's not going to stay around for very long at all. But for as long as it's out, you can be really beefing up some creatures, and all it takes is just a turn or 2 of being next to Grovekeeper, and a creature might become big to the point where it's just not being taken out. And that's kind of fun. In at number 8, I'm cheating, Panpacker Anger and Panpacker Jagger. Now, in terms of the poll I did, the only one that made the top 10 was Jagger. Jagger is a 3 power creature with Skirmish, and all the creatures to the left in the battle line gain Skirmish, meaning that if they start an attack, they take no damage in return. Panpacker Anger is a 5 power creature that gives all the creatures to the right +2 power, which means if they're on either end, then they each have 5 power and Skirmish. Now, honestly, it really depends where you're going here. If you want to be attacking, then Jagger's your dude, because then you can do a lot of attacking without taking any back. But if you're going to be defending, or if you're going to be reaping and hoping you stay on the field, then the +2 power is going to be better. Honestly, I'm more of a fan of Anger here, because I like to beef up my power so that I can either be attacking or attacked or be reaping and have a little bit more sustainability. Yes, Skirmish is better than +2 power, but only when you are instigating the attack, so I'm more of a fan of Anger personally, but I think they're both worthy of a place on the list. In at number 7, Pose Pixies, a 1 power creature with elusive. It's not very strong, but Amber stolen or captured from your pool is taken from the common supply instead. So if your opponent's using something like a Brend the Fanatic, this becomes amazing. Because Brenda Fanatic, when you play it, you give your opponent an amber, and when it's destroyed, you steal free amber, which means you gain free and your opponent loses free. But if post Pixies are down, then your opponent will still gain the free amber, but you won't be giving up the amber. And Brend is actually a pretty good example here, because it's one of the few situations where you, as the post-Pixie player, are going to be in control. If you know your opponent's going to destroy Brend to steal free amber, you can put down post-Pixies and then take him out now. You're giving your opponent free amber, but at least they're not stealing it, you're just giving it to them. Of course, do be careful, because you're giving it to them before their Forge a Key step, whereas if they destroy Brend, it's after their Forge a Key step. Don't be that person that lets them Forge a Key at the beginning of their turn just so they don't take free of your amber. That would be silly. Most of the time, your opponent is going to have the option to just take out post Pixies before they do all the stealing, but any time that they can't, this is absolutely amazing, especially against those pesky Shadows decks. In at number 6, we've got Soldiers to Flowers. Soldiers to Flowers gives you an amber bonus, and it's an action card, and when you play it, you purge each untamed creature from each player's discard pile. And for each creature purged this way, its owner gains 1 amber. Now, this is a phenomenal card with phenomenal downsides. I've got a deck with 3 Soldiers to Flowers and 4 untamed creatures. That's a bit annoying, because they're purged. When they're gone, they're gone. And if you're against an untamed deck, that can be annoying. So you're giving up your creatures here. As soon as you use this, your creatures are gone, and they ain't coming back, ladies and gentlemen. They are gone for good, which means you can't reuse them, which becomes even more relevant for a card right near the top of this list. That's a pain. And if you're playing against an untamed deck, you may well be giving your opponent a bunch of amber as well. Although really, it's just an issue of timing. If your opponent's going to get 6 amber from this, don't play it. If you know your opponent's playing Untamed, then you're probably going to end up playing this card slightly earlier than you usually would, or waiting for when your opponent has to recycle their deck because they're out of cards, and hence they have none in the discard, and then you play it. You have to be a little bit more careful here, but it's definitely an extremely powerful card, and I've played this to get 5 or 6 amber, not in the deck with 4 creatures, obviously in a different deck, and I'm sure a whole bunch of you guys have as well. It can get you a lot of amber, but you have got to play it at the right time or it can be brutal. Also, does anyone else look at this artwork and think Gears of War? Because I cannot look at this card without thinking Gears of War, and it's weird. In at number 5, we've got Glimmer. Maybe it's not that much further up the list. Glimmer is an alpha card, and when you play it, you return a card from your discard pile to your hand. Now, of course, don't be using Soldiers to Flowers if you've got a Glimmer that can maybe in a couple of turns recover a really powerful, really good, really useful creature that's going to help you win. And it's an alpha card. It's got to be the first thing you do during your doing stuff step. And it's only 1 power, but honestly, it's not the end of the world if it gets destroyed. Because if it gets destroyed, it can cycle back around and then you can use it again. It's got a great play skill. After it's played down, it's not particularly good anymore. It's a bit pointless. I mean, maybe it stays on the field and you can reap a couple of turns, but that really is it. And any well, that's not strictly true. But the vast, vast majority of creatures can just sit reaping for a couple of turns. It's nothing special, but when you play it down, being able to reuse any card is huge. Now, it's an alpha card, so you can't play a really good card, get it back, and then immediately play it again. But the fact of the matter is, you can get any card back from your discard pile, regardless of what kind of card it is, regardless of what house it belongs to, and that's wonderful. That's super useful. The only really annoying thing here is, I've got a deck with 3 Glimmer in. If you've got too many alpha cards in a deck, it's actually super annoying because you keep ending up with 2 or 3 alpha cards in your hand, but as soon as you've played an alpha card, you can't play any more alpha cards for the turn because it's no longer the start of your doing stuff phase. That's a bit of an issue, ladies and gentlemen. In at number 4, Heart of the Forest. And anyone who watched the official stream from Birmingham should be fairly familiar with this card. It gives you an amber bonus. It says each player cannot forge keys while they have more forged keys than their opponent. Which means that if you forge your first key, you can't forge your second until your opponent forges their first. And if you've got 2 forged keys, you cannot forge your third key until your opponents forge their second. I mean, if your opponent jumps out to a big lead, especially in a deck that doesn't have any artifact control, then this is going to be a great catch-up card. There is a weird thing going on here, where if your opponent goes up 2 keys to 0, you play Heart of the Forest, yay! But remember that the second you get to 2 keys forged, your opponent will then be allowed to forge their third key. So there is a slight issue here in terms of you need to make sure that you forge your second key at a point where your opponent is not allowed to forge their third key because they haven't got enough amber, etc. Or you found some way to play a miasma, etc. Which, incidentally, is exactly what happened in the final of Birmingham Vault Tour, and it still wasn't enough, unfortunately. Very sad. It's a great comeback card. It's a very awkward card to use properly, but the fact of the matter is it can stop your opponent forging keys while you catch up. That makes it extremely powerful. In at number 3, Aemberspine Mongrel. It is a 3-power creature with hazardous 3. Before it's attacked, you deal 3 damage. After your opponent uses a creature to reap, you gain an amber. I love this card. The design of this card is wonderful. Every time your opponent reaps to get an amber, you get an amber as well. So they've got to take it out. Except they've got to take it out and they've got to take 3 damage when they do so. They have no choice. So this is really, really fun. And remember, if they use a 3-power creature, the hazardous 3 will actually destroy them before the battle. So they've got to use at least a 4-power creature to take this out while taking 3 damage. And if they don't take it out, every time they reap, you get an amber as well. There are a whole bunch of cards out there in Age of Ascension which stop your opponent reaping. We've got stuff like Zyzizic Shockworm that stun people when or creatures when they reap. They're not really people. Some of them are kind of close, I suppose. And then we've got stuff like Barrister Joya, which just plain says, you can't reap, boy. Aemberspine Mongrel takes a different tact, and arguably a better tact. I really like this one. In at number 2, DUSKWITCH. And honestly, right, this should be number 1, but it never stays on the field. It's an Omega card, which means that when you play it, your turn ends. Well, you still get to draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand, but the doing stuff part of your turn ends. This is the last thing you do. But all of your creatures come down ready. Ready to go. That's amazing. Every creature basically becomes Silvertooth, except Silvertooth kinda sucks. But it comes into play ready, and everyone's done this. You play Silvertooth, oh, it's ready, I'm 2 power, this creature kinda sucks, alright, I'll reap with it. And then it almost certainly gets destroyed next turn, maybe you get another reaping. Whereas DUSKWITCH, you can play it right down, and then you can start actually doing all the cool stuff that your creatures are supposed to do. And that's amazing. The problem is it's a 1-power creature, and even with elusive, it never stays on the field. I think I played 6 games in Birmingham with decks that have DUSKWITCH in, and over those 6 games, I had 1 turn where DUSKWITCH was actually down. Because it's an Omega card, the second you play it, it goes to your opponent's turn, and they can just destroy it and you never get any benefit from it. It's super annoying. And just something simple like throwing stars will just take this right out. And what's also really annoying is throwing stars does 1 damage to each of 3 creatures, and you gain an amber if you destroy a creature. Or something like a Seeker Needle can destroy it while gaining an amber. So it is frustrating how rarely this is going to work. But when it works, it's basically the best card in the game, or pretty darn close to it. I couldn't put it at number 1 because it really doesn't work that often, but it's so good when it works that I had to put it high up on the list. But in at number 1, Punctuated Equilibrium. I adore Punctuated Equilibrium. When you play it, each player discards their hand and refills their hand as if it were the end of their turn. I.e., you draw until you've got 6, but if you've got Mother down, you draw an extra card. If your opponent's got Succubus down, you draw 1 fewer card, etc. This just gives you card advantage. There's not that much draw in Keyforge. It's one of the reasons Time Travel is so gosh darn good. There's just not a lot of draw power in the game, because at the end of your turn, you draw 2, you got 6 cards remaining, so we don't need to give a lot of draw power to the players. This is great draw. If done properly, you basically draw an extra 6 cards, or maybe even more, and then just keep going. It gives you a great card advantage. It thoroughly deserves to be up at number 1, because as good as all the rest of the cards are, this helps you draw into all those other cards. It's crazy good draw. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is a top 10 list from Untamed, but I would very much like to know what your top 10 list looks like. Whether you agree with my list, what you think should be higher, what you think should be lower. Though do remember, if you put a card up, you have to bring a card down in its place. That's how it works. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.